Thank you for watching The Forum. I'm your host, Ashley Tate, here with their co-host, Christy Largent, and we are talking to politicians and the people who report on them. And we are so lucky to have Assemblyman Brian Dahle here with us. Brian, it's so nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, you're he's so modest. And you're so humble. He was introducing himself, and he decided to just say, "I'm Brian." No title, nothing, and they were
like, "This is your assemblyman."
Yes.
What exactly does an assemblyman do?
Yeah.
So there are 80 of us in Sacramento. So there are 80 assembly members, 40 senators, and then the governor. So to pass a piece of legislation, you have to get 41, 21, and 1. Those are the votes that's the numbers you have to remember on most legislation, unless it's a tax, has to get 2/3 then. So I represent the largest assembly district in California. It's number 1, and we have 9 counties. So Shasta, Siskiyou, Modoc, Lassen, Plumas, Sierra, all Nevada, part of Placer, and part of Butte.
Wow.
So it's 25,000 square miles.
So are people able, now you really have to help me with this. So are people able to just send in a request or something to their assemblyman?
Absolutely, yes. We have, all of us have email. We do Facebook, Twitter, all those social media is all available. You can call my office and we will respond, email, whatever, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So your main job is to pass legislation.
So my job is to first represent my district and then second represent the full state. So I try to educate, mostly because California is such a big state, and that's it's different everywhere you go. There's what we do in the first Assembly District is a lot different than what they do in San Diego, where I was at last week. So I have tried to build relationships in Sacramento. I've had over 85 members of the legislature to our district.
Oh, wow.
And so to my home,
good.
the Speaker of the Assembly's been to Bieber. And they always kind of get big eyes and like, how in the heck did you ever get elected coming from Bieber? Because the population's, I think, 315.
What?
Yeah, so the population of Bieber is 315, and then I show them our way of life here. And then when I go back to Sacramento and introduce legislation to represent my district, then they can kind of have a feel for why I'm moving that type of legislation, and typically they vote for my legislation.
Go ahead.
What are some key legislation things that you've been doing?
Lots of legislation, actually. I passed my first couple years, I worked mainly on forestry and the environment type stuff, water. We did the water bond. We had a hearing here in Reading for the water bond. Then I did forestry legislation that allows people who own forested lands to go in and harvest the timber so we could reduce the fire danger. Last year we did a bill that allows, it's called Internet for All, so in the very rural parts of the state, we're going to be spending resources to actually bring internet out to those areas. Schools and libraries first, and then the regular population after that.
That's interesting. That's a lot of stuff that you just said that you tackle. So tell us what a typical day might look like for you, because I mean that's how do you work on all those different things?
We are in session Monday through Thursday from January until about the middle of July. We take a month off for summer break and then come back until about September 15th. So a normal day would be, I'm up early because I'm a farmer, so I usually get to the Capitol early. That's the time for me to read, go over my emails, check out stuff. Then we have committees. So each Assembly member has 4 or 5 committees. So we do committees for the first couple months, introduce our legislation, and then we have session. So we have session on Mondays and Thursdays. So I get up in the morning on Monday, drive to Sacramento. So leave about 4:30 in the morning. We start session at 1 o'clock, and then we're on the floor. So we do bills those days. Mondays and Thursdays we do bills, and then at the end of session we have a week long of just solid legislation. We see 200 or 300 bills, sometimes 100 a day.
Wow.
Bills that have been through the process. They go through the process, and so we have an opportunity to kind of see those along the way, and then get a feel for where we're going to be on the bills, where we're going to vote.
So Governor Brown, just in the news, he's like, this is the time he seems to be signing a lot of legislation. So is that pretty typical?
Yeah, so we finished our legislation. September 15th was the deadline. We worked till 2:30 in the morning. So that was actually it's supposed to stop at midnight, but we went to 2:30. So all those bills that we passed in that last week's of session are all at his desk now, and so he has the opportunity to either sign them or veto those bills. So this is the last opportunity either to get your bill over the finish line or try to kill a bill that is not good for you.
What's been the most, okay, go back. Why did you get into politics in the first place? I mean, a lot of us talk about it, we think about it, we rail at the TV, but we never do anything. You jumped into the fray, and why?
Actually, I got into politics kind of by accident. I've always been very a voter. My family's a voter, but I'm a landowner. So my family actually homesteaded in Siskiyou County. My grandpa was a homesteader.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been farming here for 88 years. I think I figured it out. So we've been. So anyway, I always loved to farm. Worked on the farm, and then the farmers came and asked me to run for the Farm Service Agency board, and so I ran for that.
You must have been young.
I was about 27, I think, then 28.
And what was their thought? Sorry to interrupt you. What was their thought when they did that? Because they chose you for a reason.
I was single, and they thought I had a lot of time, so they were trying to encourage me to do it. So actually one of them said, sign this form, and you don't have to do anything. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do anything. I really didn't want to do it, but I won. So I served 8 months, and then our county supervisor decided to retire, who was from Beaver. So Beaver is 75 miles away from the county seat, and we always had representation up there. So then I ran for the board of supervisors, and I served there 16 years.
While you were being a farmer?
Yes,
you also
always farmed, and got married and when I was 33 to a beautiful woman, Megan. My wife is awesome. We have 3 children, 2 boys and a little girl, and so we're busy still farming. I farm today. We're planting our crops right now, so I still farm.
Wow. How do
you must have a team.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so I have employee. Well, I have a partner. My wife is she's awesome. She helps run the business, and our kids are old enough to work. I mean, they're 15 and 17, so the boys are on the tractors. So we farm. We still run a business. There's very few legislators who actually own and operate businesses.
Yeah, and the reality is you're owning and operating a business under the regulations that you help create.
So when you said why did I get involved, that's why. Because I call it dying from 1,000 cuts. So the legislators don't know what business people do, and so I try to educate them on why the legislation hurts us and why the regulation hurts us. And I'm competing against companies that raise seed in Oregon and Nevada, Idaho, and I'm competing with those folks, and my regulations are higher than theirs, and so I'm trying to level the playing field. And I just really wanted to, I want to pass my land on to my kids if they so choose to farm, but it's getting harder to stay in business.
Right, to allow them that opportunity. Right. So so really, you're encouraging other people that if you want to see change made, you got to get in there and do it yourself. And you're showing that you can still run your business, which I think is huge.
It's pretty remarkable.
And farming is not just a business that you can do.
You don't
it's
shut
not
the door.
Or that you can just do from your computer.
No.
This is real deal stuff, and it's so interesting to get to know that side of you.
What are you farming?
So I'm a seed farmer, so I make cereal grains, so wheat, barley, oats, rye, and then we process those and sell them to the farmers for their seed stock.
Okay.
So we're planting winter crops right now. It's our big time of year, which the legislature actually works pretty good for me because we plant in the fall when we're out. We harvest during the break time in the summer. I was thinking it was probably set up by farmers. Right? And then, so it works pretty good for our business. And I'm fortunate to have a really awesome wife and family to help run the business.
Support it.
Wow.
So what kind of, what's been your biggest thing that you've loved about being in the Assembly, and what's been your biggest frustration?
So the thing I love the most about the Assembly is when I do have a tough day, and there's a lot of tough days because people don't understand what we do, and they put legislation out that hurts what I think is the future for California as far as a business owner. So I look, though, the greatest thing is that what my staff can do in the district office. We've helped people get their false teeth. We make government work for people that doesn't. So we have DMV. People trying to get their license for their car. When they have troubles, they call us, and we're able to help them. We helped people get prescription drugs that weren't available to them through Medi-Cal, Medicare, those type of things. And those are when I have a tough day, I read through the file of the stuff that my staff here in Redding does, and through the district, and it's amazing the things that people send me notes about how we changed their life because they were, we had a disabled person, which actually wasn't even our district, was from Trinity County.
Wow.
We worked 6 months, Sheldon in my office, doing casework to be able to get a new prescription that was out that helped them with their seizures, and it changed this person's life. So those are the things that when you have a bad day, you can just read through those and you know you're doing the right thing, and it peps you up.
Now, where do you plan to go for the future? You're talking about the future of California. We're all interested in that, but we want to know, where you, as an assemblyman, are you planning on staying there? You want to
So I don't have any plans. This is what I'll just be 100% honest. I'm a believer, and if God opens a door, I'll go through it. But right now, I don't open doors. That's His job.
That's right.
And I'm here right now. This is where He put me. I've been selected the minority leader of our caucus, which is
big
amazing.
deal. Very big deal.
I'm going to do that. I'm trying to get more people elected to the office, to the Assembly and the Senate. That have the same views as I have, and that's my goal right now. And I have no plans for the future other than I will always be a farmer.
Yeah, I love that.
And so I will, and I want to raise my kids and put them to a good school, and live the American and California dream.
Yeah,
I love that. Gosh, I want to give him a big hug. You're such a humble person, and you're so down to earth that you don't generally see that from politicians. Yeah. And the quotes that we read and all of that, it's very focused on politics and things like that. So it's just nice to see the human side of your life and what you're doing.
Well, I'm hearing a lot about service.
Yes,
is,
absolutely.
Really the crux of it's called public service for a reason,
yes,
right?
That's
right.
True.
And you're actually doing it. I worked for Senator Thurmond years ago, and they loved him from South Carolina. He served in the Senate, U.S. Senate for like 70 years, 60 years, some crazy number. But you know what? I was with him on his 90th birthday. He still was loving serving his people, and that's what I hear you doing, Brian.
You can make a difference.
90 years old, serving the public. How do people get more information if they want to talk to you about any issue? How can they get in touch with you?
So I have obviously Facebook, briandahle.com. Just Google. If you Google me, you'll get me. No problem there. And if you're a voter, and you read your sample ballot, I put my cell phone number on there, and you'll be amazed. Yes.
Do people call?
They do. I get about 400 or 500 calls every cycle,
Whoa.
and those are votes I can usually count on because I actually answer my phone, and it works. So if you're a voter, look at your voter registration guide.
This is America at its.
Go do that.
This is America at its finest, I think. We talk
really
politics in the big global politics, but really what you're doing, Brian, is what's changing lives here every day for us in the North State.
Well,
so thank you.
It's my pleasure.
We appreciate it. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have an interview with an interviewer, someone who reports on politics. Brian, thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And we'll be right back.
Hi, we are back, and we're talking to Sean Longoria, the reporter for the Record Searchlight, and the person, or one of the people, that report on people like Brian Dahle, the Assemblyman.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think our viewers are loving putting a face with the name.
Yes.
Because we read your name every day, but have no idea what you look like. So.
Well, here I am.
I know. Now, I have a kind of oddball question. Is it common for reporters to be a little more introverted?
I think you'd find a mix in any newsroom.
Yeah.
Just because you have to go out and talk to people, I think you have to kind of, even if you're an introvert, put yourself out there and behave like an extrovert, even if you are. I'd say I'm a fairly introverted person, but part of my job, a big part of my job, is talking to people.
Yeah.
So you've got to get out and do that, interact with people.
What attracted you to journalism?
Well, I've always liked writing, even since when I was in grade school. I wrote little short fiction stories, created little characters, and growing up, my parents always subscribed to the newspaper, so I'd have a newspaper every day.
Okay.
Actually getting into the field, that was kind of a bit, not by accident, but a bit on a whim. When I was in college, I had another major. I'm not going to say now because it's a great major, and I don't want to disparage the folks who picked it. But I decided that wasn't for me, so I was looking for other things. And I'm like, I always liked writing. Maybe I'll take a creative writing class or a journalism class. So I did that, and the first story I wrote, I got great feedback from the professor. So I was like, okay, let's see what I can do with this. And I kept going, really enjoyed it, and a few months out of college, the Record Searchlight hired me. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, was that fast?
It was surprisingly quick.
So it piqued your interest, and then
Boom.
you were like, I'll just see how it goes. Let me put my resume in, and they're like, snatched you up right away.
Yeah, the journalism degree helped. One of my college professors worked for the paper too, so I think that helped.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah. Were you from Reading? North
No,
State?
I grew up in Chico,
Oh, in
actually.
Chico, okay.
Yeah.
Well, still the North State.
It's still the North State. Reading and Chico are different towns, though.
Yeah, they really
They're
are.
very different towns.
One thing you guys may not know about Sean, because he's sitting, is he is 6'7", like massive. He's
tall.
We have our chairs hiked up so that we can look like we're the same height. So coming up to people and asking them questions and stuff, sometimes it could probably be a little like, whoa, what's going on here?
You have to factor that in too, so I try to be, polite.
Yeah.
Pretty
Cordial.
low key, you can
Cordial.
tell. So what's been your favorite story? You've been with the Record Searchlight how long now?
7 years.
7 years. So there's a lot of stories.
That's probably in the thousands by now.
Yeah.
One story that I really love talking about, I wrote a few years ago, I think it was 2012, 2013, I'm not sure the exact date, but it was a fun story. I talked to a Redding family who went on vacation in Mexico, and while they were scuba diving, they found a camera.
What?
Oh.
A digital camera. It was a waterproof one, so it wasn't like, sunken treasure or anything.
Yeah.
So, how do you figure out who owns a random digital camera at the bottom of the ocean? You look at the pictures, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So they started looking at the pictures, nothing scandalous, but they found a picture of a woman in like a racing bib from like a 5K.
Okay.
They recognized the name of the company or the name of one of the organizations involved, and they traced that back and found this woman. Turns out she lives in Canada.
Oh my God.
So this Redding family goes down to Mexico, finds a digital camera, uses the pictures to trace it back to a woman in Canada.
That is awesome.
So I talked to the woman who got her camera back. I talked to the company that did the race. I talked to the family. That was a really great story, and I really enjoyed reporting on it and really
So it was
loved writing
international.
it. Absolutely. And it was a fun story to write and a fun story to report.
Yeah, and serendipitous. How do you look at some of those things where you're going to report on something and you now have to take all this information and bring it succinctly into a nice little pretty article for people like us who have no idea of any of that information? What is that like? What does that whole process look like?
That's hard. Hard question to say.
No, that question's not on here. I want to know.
So it comes down to deciding what's the most important piece of information for you to know, and how can I fit that into a story, something that you're going to want to read instead of just a list of facts. Because
Yes.
we do write stories for people to read.
Yes.
We don't often, sometimes you might see an article in list form, but that's still written so you'll read it.
Right.
So I think in this case it was about just telling the story of how it happened. That was an easy one. In other cases you might have to look at what the big issue is and narrow it down to how does this affect your life.
See, I love
What's
that.
in it for my reader?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big
Yes.
question, isn't it?
I mean, that's ultimately the biggest question is,
Why should they care?
yeah, why should they care? Why are we writing this story? And it's so people will read it and have that information.
Well, in this day and age of 24-hour news cycle, it's an interesting time to be in news. What do you think about the whole fake news thing?
That's concerning. I mean, it's a problem when you're trying to report things that are actually true, and you've got just a wave of information that may not be true. So it's a problem that I think not just the media, but everybody deals with.
Now, bringing it back to politics, when you go to write about politicians or figures in the figures that are well known, I guess I should say famous figures. How do you find out like the actual facts? Because that must be tough to be the person that whatever you write, people are going to go by.
Right.
Talking about the fake news and all that, how do you?
Well, a lot of times when I encounter a politician, it will be because I'm writing about some action or some bill that will affect life here in Reading or in the North State. So when you look at the bill, you can look at what the bill actually says and what maybe the legislative analyst's office has done and said this is going to be the impact. So you have a basis for how you can do your reporting.
Okay.
When it comes to people weighing in on, oh, this bill is going to do this versus this bill is going to do that, you can present both of those sides, and if neither of them happen to be the case, or you've got disputing information, you can include that too.
See, I like that. I like how you just, because that's true. Like you do see both sides, and it makes it makes it nice when a reporter can add both of those, and that comes from being unbiased. And sometimes that's tough to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's I live in the world, I live in this community, so of course I'm affected by day-to-day things, and I have my own views, but it's really about keeping those to myself and in my life when I'm not a reporter. So
How
just
hard
being
is
fair.
that?
It's actually a lot easier than I think people might assume it would be, or people might think when they're reading a story. But it's just, here's one piece of information, here's another piece of information that might conflict with it. How do we fairly represent both of those?
And then add to that this whole new field of unconscious bias that we all have, and reporters have it just because they're human. We all have it, and being aware that I might be coloring some of my stuff with my unconscious bias, and I don't even know I'm doing it. Right?
Sure, yeah.
So, how do you think people should handle the plethora of fake news that we're getting, and not just fake news, all news? I mean, it's so overwhelming.
Well, you have to look at which sources you trust for information. Fake news is easy to spot. It's a lot easier than people think it is. It will
give us some clues.
Well, if you go to a story and the page is loaded with ads, and a lot of people have opinions on advertising on websites, but these will be particularly egregious. So there'll be an ad almost every paragraph of the story. If the story doesn't have an author's name on it, that's a good sign.
Okay.
If the headline is so ridiculous and you can only find it from that one source, if it's something so explosive that every media outlet should be reporting on it and only one is, that's a good clue.
Now, this is probably not true.
Yeah.
It's made up. It is a story in the true sense.
What types of things are you focused on? What's your beat? Like, what is your...
Right now, it's varied over the years from covering smaller cities. Now my beat's called core issues, so that's kind of like the things that affect day-to-day life in Reading. A lot of that comes down to covering what city government is doing, and things like public safety, things like land use.
Okay.
So I'm curious, do you see Reading's recently had a shift in our city manager? Do you see a shift? Do you get a feel for something different happening at City Hall now, or a movement, or more new fresh energy? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts having lived through that?
I mean, one big area where you see the change is on social media. The city's been a lot more aggressive on Facebook and Twitter. You can see that. They're posting a lot more. They're just being more active, trying to engage with people in that regard. You've also seen it recently with the police department. Again, they're increasing their activity to kind of try to address what people are complaining about more, those kind of quote-unquote quality of life things that they talk about often.
So when you have these beats, I'm going back to this because I find this very interesting. When reporters are given beats, you're oftentimes given those, correct?
Yeah.
Or is it something that you're just naturally interested in and you get to write about it?
I mean, because we're a local newspaper and because our staffing is not huge, you just kind of weave in and out of your beat and any other interest areas you want to focus on. So the story I mentioned about the scuba diving,
the Canadian.
Yeah, that came just from a random tip that I decided to chase down, and that was a really interesting and fun story. So you do have to stick to your beat, but also because there's so much news happening and so few people to report it, you've got to branch out, and if there's a story you're interested in, you can chase it down too.
Okay.
So if people know of something going on, they want you to do a story on it, do they call you? How do...
Some people call me personally, some people email our sort of general tip email, some people call the newsroom, I've gotten stories off social media before, chasing down somebody's post and saying, hey, can you talk to me more about this? So there's a variety of methods, and I encourage everyone to use all of them all the time.
And I don't know if we have time for this, but what would you recommend to someone who is open to wanting to maybe become a reporter or go into journalism?
I would say pick a school and see what their program entails.
Sean, I'm going to get you for that. Well, I mean, what types of skills would they be looking for?
You have to be able to talk to people.
Okay.
You have to be able to really empathize with people too if they're going through something tough. So really being able to understand what a person is going through and being sensitive to that too, because we report on some tough stuff.
You do.
Yeah, it's not all happy days.
No,
that's
definitely
for sure.
not. Definitely not.
Well, the best way, of course, Reading.com.
That is the
It's
absolute
hub,
best
right?
way.
That's
Yeah.
the best way. So if you've got a good story tip or you know somebody who does this, you're great to contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sean, thank you so much for coming on. I
Yeah.
think what an interesting day
Thank you
with
both.
Assemblyman Dahle and now you who report on Assemblyman Dahle.
Yeah.
I know, I love it. In North State. There's always something exciting,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Definitely.
So Reading.com is the best way to get to Sean. And Assemblyman Dahle says just Google him. So you got your marching orders. Thanks for watching us here on the forum, and we're going to look forward to seeing you again next week right back here.